Yeah, on the internet, and so you can see little videos.
Good morning. Quite as pretty a Saturday as it was last week, but you know, for early spring, this just really isn't too bad. Compost tea is the subject of the day. How many of y'all make compost tea or know about compost tea now? Wow, okay, got some people who are already doing it. How many people are new here? How many people have never been here before? We got, okay, we've got a few new ones. Okay, even though most of these folks are seasoned veterans, I will tell you the few ground rules that we have here. Number one, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Don't hesitate to interrupt me at any point. If it's anything I'm going to cover later, I'll put you off. If not, we'll stop and talk about it right then. And secondly, the other game that we play, and all these people know exactly how this is done, but if you don't want to admit something is going on in your own yard, you simply stick up your hand and say, my neighbor couldn't come today, but they wanted me to ask you about this. So that's the way that you can ask anything, and we may know what's going on, but if it makes you feel better, that's fine. Okay, my intent this morning is to teach you a little bit about compost tea, to teach you about the benefits of what it will do, as well as what it is, and then for anyone who is interested in making your own tea, I'll show you how you can make, in effect, your own homegrown, so to speak, tea brewer. My friend Alton Grimm gave us a bunch of 5-gallon buckets that a friend had given him for the bakery up in Bernie. These are to give away to anybody that wants. If y'all need a bucket or two, or you just need a bucket, even if you aren't going to make compost tea, we probably have some more around. So that's what these are here for you when you leave. Come on in. Compost tea. Compost tea can be used for a lot of different things. What compost tea is just a super concentration of all the beneficial microbes that come out of compost, basically. We know that compost is full of beneficial bacteria. We know that compost is full of beneficial fungi. We know that compost is full of various things that we call protozoans. There are a lot of good things in compost. Making what we call compost tea enables us to take the good stuff out of the compost and multiply it 1,000-fold or 10,000-fold or 100,000-fold in the case of the bacteria. Fungi don't reproduce that quickly, but compost tea is actually something which is brewed. And if you want to see a big-time brewer, that thing right outside over there has the gray top on it. That's what you get if you want to pay about $1,800 and go out and buy your own compost tea brewer. I'm also going to show you how to make a mini compost tea brewer. That makes 25 gallons at a time. Little buckets, you can make about 5 gallons at a time. Is your tea as good as what's made in a big brewer? Well, the way that my business partner and I learned about compost tea, we paid several $100s a piece to go to a seminar taught by a lady named Dr. Lane Ingham, who is the world authority on compost tea. Part of this seminar that was held up in Austin, she invited people to bring their own compost tea makers, people who are experienced brewers, and the way she taught us how to analyze compost tea was by looking at all these samples of teas that different people made, and then we rated the teas as to which was the absolute best tea there and which was the absolute worst tea there. There were about 10 or 12 people brought compost tea brewers to make compost tea for us to analyze. The most expensive was a machine that Malcolm Beck's wife bought for him. That was about a $20,000 machine called a Worm Gold compost tea maker. The cheapest thing was Bruce Dooley's 5-gallon bucket, that which is basically what I'm going to show you how to make this morning. The number one tea, and there were a lot of them in between, things ranging in price from $500 to $5,000 or $6,000 in tea brewers. The best tea there was made in Malcolm Beck's $20,000 machine. The second best tea out of a dozen different kinds of teas was Bruce's 5-gallon bucket. So you can make pretty good tea without having to have a real expensive setup. Now, if you want to make large quantities of compost tea, well, then you may want to take this and expand it into a 25 or 50-gallon drum or something like that. But the principle will be the same. no matter what size, no matter what amount of tea you are making. Yes, sir.
What's the criteria for evaluating the best versus the least?
You look at, which we've already done with our tea this morning, by the way, with a good microscope, you look at the number and kinds of bacteria that you have in it. You look at the number and kinds of fungi that you have in it. You look at the number and kinds of protozoans that you have in it. Those are the three principal things you're looking at. And it helps to have learned from an expert, or in my case, I'm an old research biologist by training. I spent a lot of time looking through microscopes in my college days, so it was sort of second nature. But it's based on the number and variety of microbes that are in there. And of course, the number and variety of microbes you get in there, part of that depends on the compost that you started with, and part of it depends on, exactly how you've stimulated the tea in the brewing process, so to speak. Let me tell you first of all about some of the benefits of compost tea, and then we'll talk about exactly how it's made and a few other things. But compost tea serves as a natural fungicide. If it's sprayed on the leaves, you have enough beneficial fungi in compost tea that they tend to occupy all the sites where bad fungi might actually attack a plant, and plants whose leaves are coated periodically with compost tea show an increased immunity to fungal infections. Compost tea may include a bunch of microbes which are damaging to insects. We find that plants that are sprayed with compost tea are more resistant to insect damage, and when compost tea is actually drenched onto the soil, it improves the nutrient usage and it makes your fertilizers more effective. In some cases, it makes the plants more drought resistant. In almost all cases, it simply helps things to grow better. One of the things that Elaine showed us when we took the course was, and this was actually taken in Australia, you know what the big pivot irrigators are that when you fly over and you see crop circles down on the fields? They had taken, and I've forgotten what the crop was, but in half that pivot, they applied compost tea to it, and in the other half they didn't. The half that they didn't, the soil was about 60% plants and about 20% bare soil. You could tell there was growth there, but it was, there's just almost as much bare dirt as there were plants. The half that they sprayed with compost tea was absolutely solid green. I wish we know what the difference in harvest was, but this was a place where they were, paying her for her analysis, and she showed them the picture of the difference in the compost tea treated side and the untreated side. So what did they do? They went back and treated the other side, and the whole thing turned out pretty good. But it does increase yields. There's a lady up near Austin, a lady named what is her last name? Betsy Ross is her name, and her big deal is raising organic beef. She raises longhorns as the principal thing she produces, but she sprays her pastures with compost tea, and she has the fattest, best-looking cattle you've ever seen, probably because of the increased quality of the forage that the cows are eating. So there are lots and lots of things that compost tea does well. There are things we don't fully understand. Yes, sir.
What's the difference then of using compost tea versus just spreading good compost?
I'll tell you about that in just a minute.
Okay.
Tell you about that in just a second when we talk about really how you make it. One of her interesting stories, one of her employees is a fellow that came back from Vietnam with some sort of horrible flesh-attacking, I don't know whether they thought it was a fungus or a bacteria or whatever else. It wasn't lethal, but said every time the weather warmed up in the summer, his skin literally started falling off. He literally, people couldn't stand to look at him. He, had to wear a hat and long sleeves and everything everywhere he went. And he'd been to every hospital in the country trying to figure out what it was, and they couldn't figure out anything to control it. It was something that showed up in warm weather, and then in cool weather it'd kind of grow a skin back, and in the summer it looked kind of like a cadaver again. Well, one of the things that she had him do and this lady, her company, she used to be a professor of microbiology at the University of Oregon, and then the compost tea business grew into quite a business for her, and it was successful enough she now has offices on 5 continents and literally works all over the world. But they were dealing with some sort of fungal problem on some trees outside of a courthouse building somewhere, and she put this particular gentleman to work spraying these trees on a daily basis with compost tea for like 2 weeks. And if anybody's ever used a big sprayer where you spray up into the trees, you know you get about as much on you as you do on the tree, which is another reason we don't recommend poisonous products. But this guy just got himself totally drenched with compost tea every day. His skin cleared up and the problem never came back. There was something in there that was working against that particular pathogenic bacteria or whatever it was. So there really, in most compost teas, there is nothing harmful in there, and again, they do things that we don't truly fully understand their mechanism. But oh, okay. All right, I'll show you some pictures of a few things here in just a minute too. Take them through our microscope inside. We make our own compost tea every weekend, and we always look at it just to see how good it is, because we can evaluate some of the things I'm going to tell you about this morning as far as making it. The compost itself, of course, is great, and compost puts a lot of microbes into the soil. It has a lot of organic material in it, and it contains these good bacteria and good fungi and things. If we were to take compost and soak it in a bucket of water, what we would get off of that is a liquid that we would call compost leachate, which is just the material that was leached out of the compost. And then we could spray that around, and we would get a lot of the good things that were in the compost, and we would get it in a liquid form. If we took it one step further, if we in effect took our compost leachate, which we prepared in a certain way, and then we put that in the right environment, we made all those bacteria and fungi, and they're really, really happy, they would start reproducing very quickly. Bacteria can have a new generation every 7 minutes. So what does that mean? 7 minutes later you have twice as many, 14 minutes later you have 4 times as many, 21 minutes later you have 8 times or 16 times as many, and on and on and on. So you can grow a whole lot of microbes in a big hurry if you make those microbes really happy. And that's what brewing compost tea is. We've taken that soup, so to speak, that is full of all sorts of good things, and we put it in such an environment that those things can reproduce themselves 1,000 times over. So when we get compost tea, we've taken all those good microbes and we've put them on a reproductive program that will make rabbits look like slowpokes. So when you're putting out compost tea, you're probably putting out 10,000 times as many microbes as you would if you were strictly putting out the compost, or if you were putting out compost leachate. So making compost tea is actually what we call a brewing process. Now, we say compost tea because that's easy to say. If we wanted to be totally accurate, what we would really want to say is actively aerated compost tea. Because the number one thing that these microbes need to reproduce, after a couple of basic nutrients, but they have to have oxygen. They have to have a lot of oxygen. And the biggest danger in making compost tea is that you overstimulate it to the point that the microbes use up all the oxygen that's in the liquid, and then they die. And then what you can have, I mean, it's bad because now you've killed off a lot of the good life that you were trying to produce. But if that material sits there without enough oxygen in it, then you get some bad guys growing. There are 2 kinds of bacteria in particular. I guess we could expand and just say 2 kinds of organisms in general. But there are what we call aerobic, and then there are what we call anaerobic. Aerobic means they need oxygen to live. Anaerobic means that they will grow without oxygen. Aerobic bacteria, for the most part, are 100% good things to have around, with the exception, well, we can classify them as round or rod shape or spiral shape. The round ones are good, the rod-shaped ones are probably even better, the spiral ones are much rarer, and they are, for the most part, bad guys. But you're not likely to find those in your compost tea. Anaerobic microbes include some things you're familiar with. You're not likely to find them in your compost tea, but anaerobes include things like salmonella, like the bad form of E. coli, like botulism. These are all anaerobic types of bacteria. And so we want to be sure that our compost tea always has lots and lots and lots of oxygen going through it. That's one thing we want to be sure of. The second thing we want to be sure of is that we don't overstimulate. I'm going to tell you about some things that will help the bacteria reproduce in a hurry, but we don't want to give them so much energy that they simply reproduce faster than the oxygen can get into the water. That could cause it to go anaerobic as well. So, in making compost tea, we want lots of oxygen. We don't want to overdo it with stimulants. But what happens once we take that compost tea away from the oxygen source? If you go look down inside of the brewer over there, it's just a billion bubbles coming up. It's got an expensive rubber diaphragm of some sort on the bottom that just makes bubbles like you wouldn't believe. I mean, Lawrence Welk and his bubble machine never could hold a candle to this thing. But once you take it away from the oxygen, then obviously things start slowly going downhill. That's the one important thing about actively aerated compost tea. Once you make it, use it quickly. If you take it out of your own brewer, take it straight out somewhere and start applying it, either spraying it on or pouring it on. If you get it from us and take it home, use it within 2 hours. Don't leave it sitting around overnight, because tomorrow morning it's not going to be nearly as good as it was when you first took it home. You say, well, I have to drive 3 hours to get home. I'm going to come, pay $5 a gallon for your compost tea, but it's 4 hours for me to get home. What's going to happen? Well, if you just put it in a bottle, it's not gonna be real good. I guess you could get your wife or husband or whoever to sit there all the way home and go like this all the way home. But that might get old if you did that for 4 hours going down the road. If you really want to carry compost tea any great distance, go to one of the sporting goods stores and get those little aerators. I mean, some of you folks are probably fishermen, and you know those little aerators you put in the minnow bucket so you keep your minnows alive or your shrimp alive or whatever else. Get one of those little aerators that plugs into the cigarette lighter in your car. Keep the oxygen bubbling through it, and it will last for a longer period of time. But one thing about actively aerated compost tea, use it quickly. Now I'm going to tell you the ideal times in the brewing process, when it's at its absolute peak, when it kind of is falling off. But the oxygen is really, really important, and it's important that you keep the oxygen going while you're transporting it if you have to go any great distance, and that you use it, quickly once you get home with it. How much do you use? Well, there's nothing in compost tea that is bad. So it would be physically impossible for you to overdo it. How much do you need to use? When they're using it on big acreage, they figure 5 gallons per acre. So at home, 1 gallon of it, if you want to spray it, is probably enough to put on your yard or on your garden or whatever else. 2 or 3 gallons, that's going to be very, very adequate for the average home yard. And let's see, what else do I want to tell you about it before I start telling you how to make it?
How about dilutions?
Can you dilute it when you put it in?
Absolutely. Yeah, we figure probably diluted about 5 to 1. 1 part compost tea to about 5 parts water would be an ideal.
Yeah, so like a quart to a gallon of sprayer.
That'd be perfect. That'd be perfect. Yes.
5 to 1.
Should we use rainwater as opposed to?
I'll tell you about water in just a second. If you have rainwater is the absolute best thing you can use. Yes, sir.
Does keeping it cold making a difference on it?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question, and you pretty much want to have it at room temperature or the ambient temperature, whatever the air temperature is outside. There are bacteria that operate at virtually every temperature out there. In real cold conditions, we've got bacteria we call psychrophilic bacteria that work in the cold. Ones that work in relative room temperature we call mesophilic bacteria. Ones, or microbes I guess I should say, because it'd be fungi too. Then at high temperatures we have the ones we call thermophilic. And they're probably all serve their own purposes, but you want your compost tea to be pretty much at room temperature or outside air temperature, because you want those microbes active when you put them out. And if you take your compost tea and you keep it real cold, you're going to slow down the guys that are working at the temperature it is. You're going to speed up the real cold-loving guys. Then you're going to spray it out where it's hot again, and it simply won't work as well. So you're better off to try to keep it pretty much at room temperature. Now, you may occasionally see what are referred to as stabilized compost teas. I haven't really found one that I was real impressed with. But stabilized compost teas, they have taken a compost tea and then they have put at least some of the microbes, come on in, into a resting state or into a dormant state. And that sounds good. They do this either with super concentrated molasses or with phosphoric acid, or there's a third thing they use to stabilize compost tea. But the bad news is that not all microbes have a resting state. And if you buy what they call stabilized compost tea, they've killed off about half the forms of life that were in that compost tea because those half didn't have a resting state, so you, quote, couldn't really stabilize them. The good news is that you still have lots and lots of life in there. The best inoculants that you can go out and buy, and various people, sell things that will put some microbes into the soil and all, most of those things have 10, 12, 15 different kinds of microbes in there. In your compost tea, you can easily expect to have 10,000 different kinds of bacteria and up to 5,000 different kinds of fungi. So if you kill off half the varieties, now we're only down to 5,000 kinds of bacteria and 2,500 kinds of fungi. Still better than just about any kind of product that you're going to buy. So even the stabilized compost teas are okay. But where you have the opportunity, go with the full strength stuff and use it immediately. Yes, sir.
If you wanted to stabilize, could you put a can of Coke in a 5-gallon bucket?
I don't know how you would stabilize it yourself. I don't know how well that would work. Quite frankly, I don't know how they do it commercially. But I don't think stabilizing it is something we could really do at home. You'd do better just to find a way to keep the oxygen going, even if just like a mini-bucket aerator that you plugged in somewhere, just keep the oxygen going while you hauled it around. Yes, ma'am.
If you're doing a little bit of acreage, like for the longhorn cattle, you do it in grids to keep the oxygen active?
Actually, what they normally will do is your typical spray rig. I have a Continental Belton sprayer, for instance, and it has a deal in there that keeps it agitated, and that's putting enough oxygen in there that it will last for a longer period of time. So if you're doing that, lots and lots and lots of acreage, yeah, you would do it in grids. But my tank holds 250 gallons, and I can keep that tea, going plenty long enough to put that 250 gallons of tea out.
So you can use it on the natural grasses, such as Little Blue Stem or Lindheimer Muley, and can you put the animals right back on it?
Absolutely. There's nothing in there that's going to hurt them. Okay. And cattle ought to be grass-fed. This business of feeding cows grain and corn and things like that, like they do in the feedlots, what it does inside the cow, it changes the pH, the acidity level, the alkaline acid level in the intestines. It actually changes the pH in the cow's intestine to where the bad form of E. coli can grow. You cannot have the pathogenic E. coli in grass-fed cattle. It's simply when cows are eating what nature designed them to eat, their system is such that the bad stuff can't grow. It's the feedlot where you pick up these bad things. And if all beef was grass-fed, you'd never ever hear about an E. coli recall. But I'll let you listen to Bruce Dooley. He'd get on his soapbox for an hour at a time about all the bad stuff of this Franken farming, as he calls it. Just pictures of a couple of things. This is actually a beneficial nematode. Many times we will find beneficial nematodes in our compost tea. Those guys aren't reproducing in the compost tea. Their generation time is several days, and we're going to be brewing compost tea for maybe 48 hours. So these guys aren't reproducing. This is a little flagellate of some sort, probably a dinoflagellate, which is a type of protozoan, which is a good guy. A lot of the little dots that you see around this nematode, if you were to look at this under the microscope, you would see these things moving. Those are mostly round bacteria, maybe with some rod-shaped ones in there. These long fibrous things that you see right here, these are beneficial fungi. You can tell something about whether the fungi are good guys or bad guys by how wide this little strand is. Plus, the good guys are the only ones that branch. And if you look carefully at this, you'll see that that's divided. You'll see that this one up on top, and I can pass this around if you'll look at it on your way out, look at it a little bit more closely. We know that that is very good fungus that is in this particular compost tea. This is about 400 diameters of magnification. This is probably about 90 diameters of magnification. If you've got a good microscope, a good light microscope, you can certainly see what's in your compost tea. I'd hoped to have it done by now, but it's been a busy spring. By the time we do this again, I hope I will have a camera that we can actually put. Roberta took these pictures just holding her camera up to the eyepiece on the microscope and snapping a picture. Malcolm Beck has a setup where he actually has a camera that fits into the microscope and then can project the image on a TV screen. I want to either borrow Malcolm's or get one of our own so that we can actually put some compost tea and then show you up on the TV screen what you're looking at, but next time. Didn't quite get around to that this time. Any other questions about general characteristics of compost tea before we talk about how you make it? Jason?
Nematodes in the tea? Can you use that to broadcast them as well?
You could certainly, when you get the nematodes on the sponge, you could certainly put them in compost tea rather than water. There would be no problem with that. But beneficial nematodes can drown if they stay in too much water too long. So I would not put your beneficial nematodes in during the brewing process. I would put them in just as you got ready to spray your tea. Yes, sir.
What if you put straight oxygen in there as opposed to air? What would that do?
Cost a lot of money.
Besides that, would it accelerate the process?
It probably would accelerate it slightly, but again, I want you to go out and look in this before we leave at the amount of air that's going through there. You'd use up a tank of oxygen in a big hurry, because you want this not looking like a stormy sea, but you want it to look, you know, almost like it's boiling. You want that much oxygen going through it. And I don't, unless you happen to own a welding company or something, I don't think it would be, you know, a cost-effective thing to use straight oxygen for it.
Okay.
Plus, it can be dangerous to handle, especially if you're a smoker. Things go boom when you get too much oxygen together. But just good air is plenty. Yes, sir.
Were you gonna talk now or later about the kinds of compost, like worm castings, that sort of thing?
Why don't I talk about that when I talk about making it? I'll talk about that in just a second. Yes,
Can
sir.
you put some of that drive in it also?
That's a good question. We'll talk about that as well.
He listened to your show this morning.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Okay, actually making your compost tea goes through 2 or 3 steps. First of all, we've got to have decent water to start with. And if you have rainwater, that obviously is good, clean water with nothing harmful in it, and that would be a great place to start. Most of us don't have rainwater. Now, of course, I live in the country, so I can use well water because there's nothing harmful in my water. But if you're drinking this crud that San Antonio sells and calls city water, it's been treated with one of 2 things. Most of the SAW system still treats their water with chlorine to take out the bad bugs that are in there. And you need to remember now, what do they put chlorine in there? They put it in there to kill the bacteria and fungus that might be in the water. So we don't really want to be using water that is highly chlorinated when we first start our compost tea making, because we don't want to kill off the microbes that we're trying to produce. The nice thing about chlorine is that it goes away fairly quickly when you bubble it. So you're going to start out, you're going to put your water into your tea maker, and you're going to bubble it probably for maybe an hour before you put anything else in there, because that is what will get the chlorine out of the water. Now, if you have, excuse me, if you happen to be in a municipality that uses, instead of chlorine, uses something they call chloramine to disinfect the water, well, it's not real good for you to begin with, but it doesn't go away, and bubbling will not get chloramine out of your water. There is a way you can get rid of it, though, and that is to use the same kind of drops that you use in your fish aquarium. You know, you don't want to take water out of the tap and put your tropical fish in it, or chances are it'll kill your fish. So you get those little zip drops that you just squeeze a few drops in. That is perfectly good for taking the chlorine and stuff out of the water so that you can make good compost tea with it. So first thing we're going to do is start with good quality water. Yes?
How about if you take water out of a pond, you know, recirculating the pond and has fish in it and so forth?
If you haven't put any chlorine or anything in there, that would be ideal. As a matter of fact, if you have pond water, that's going to be even better. And that was one thing that that they kind of cheated on when we were doing our contests. That's the one thing that Malcolm and Bruce had in common. Instead of taking water out of the tap, they had kind of a little pond out front. And they sneaked out, we didn't know it at the time, and got about 2 cups of pond water and dumped in, you know, along with their other water. And that probably also contributed to some degree to the diversity of microbes. But yeah, water out of a pond or stream would be ideal. Yes, sir.
Okay, Bob, I have a rainwater collection system. Can I use the waste in my roof washers as the water for brewing the compost tea?
I would say yes. You know, last year it might have been an issue because your roof collects so much toxic material when it goes for a long time between rains. This year we're getting rains often enough that your roof's pretty clean. There is some concern as far as human consumption on a metal roof, whether you're picking up lead and cadmium and things like that, but that's not going to bother your microbes. Your microbes, as a matter of fact, you know, it's one of the ways you disinfect things that are contaminated with lead and other things. There's a microbe out there that will eat or decompose every known substance out there, in fact even some radioactive waste, with the exception of one kind of herbicide, the picloram that we talk about. So yeah, that water should be just fine. Yes, sir.
You could use condensate from your air conditioner.
Condensate would be just fine. Absolutely. Yes.
How about filtered water?
Second.
Our water is, we live out in Divine, and I don't know what's in our water, but we get these reports that says cancer causing this and cancer causing this, and so we have
microbes don't get cancer.
We have this machine that makes what do you call it?
RO water, reverse osmosis water.
No, it's purified water.
Okay.
So we can, but it takes everything out, boils it, and so we just use that.
And that, if that's what the other question was, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. But your regular water is probably fine too.
Okay.
Yes.
So that means that when you water your plants with water out of the hose, then that's not good. It's got chlorine in it, right?
Well, it is so dilute that there's not enough in there to really hurt your plants.
Oh.
But there's enough to hurt some of the microbes. Okay. But now, is it just devastating the microbes? If you are starting out, you know, when you first put it in there, yeah, it could affect a significant number of microbes. But then the question comes up, if I'm going to put it in the sprayer on the end of my hose, I'm using chlorinated water to go spray this out. Well, you got so many microbes in it at that point that the chlorine in the water kills 20% of them. Now you've only got 80,000, you know, per drop or whatever instead of 100,000. So using a little chlorinated water to spray your compost tea, it'd be better if you had rainwater, but it's not going to totally nullify the effects. Spraying it out.
So if you're not putting compost tea and you're just watering your plants, that's still okay?
That is just fine, as long as you don't have a water softener. Now if you have a water softener, you've bumped up the chlorine level to the point it will be harmful to your plants. But no, if you're just watering your plants with city water, and people come in and they say, oh gosh, I don't want to use my city water because that'd be bad for the plants. They're getting this plant out of the greenhouse over there where it's been sitting there for 2 weeks getting watered with city water ever since it got here. So no, it's not going to affect it that much.
Yeah, I collect my rainwater, and sometimes when it goes through the gutter system, there's leaves in there, and it picks up, makes it leachy basically. Because it comes out kind of a brownish color.
You're probably getting more good stuff in there when you do that.
But what I was going to ask you is, would that turn anaerobic if you let it sit in your 55-gallon drum?
And that's a real good question. Under normal conditions, no. But if you put the kind of stimulants that I'm going to tell you about in there and didn't bubble it, yes, that would go anaerobic very quickly. Anything else? Okay, so we've got our water to start with. We probably want to keep it from foaming. When you start bubbling, you really don't want a whole lot of foam coming up. So we're probably going to put just a little bit of cooking oil of some sort in there to cut down on the sudsing effect, the foaming effect, so to speak. Doesn't really matter what kind, but you do not want to use olive oil. Don't ever use olive oil to cut down on foaming. The reason is, olive oil, one of the benefits of olive oil is that it is antimicrobial. Olive oil kills bacteria. So we're not going to put that in our compost tea, as something to keep it from foaming up too much. Also, when we talk about stimulants, the one thing we never want to put in compost tea is honey. If you ever notice, honey is a miraculous material. You can leave it sitting out for days, and you notice it never grows any mold. You put out a little sugar water or something like that, it's going to be covered with black mold, very, very quickly. Honey is also naturally antimicrobial. So, just the bottom line, in making compost tea, we don't ever want to use anything that is antimicrobial, and that basically means no honey and no olive oil. Beyond that, I can't think of a whole lot that's really going to cause any problems. Now, I'm going to back up just a second and talk a little bit about making your homemade tea brewer, and then you'll understand what we're going to do a little bit better. This is about $20 worth of stuff that I went and picked up yesterday, and the main thing that your brewer does, the main thing this bucket does, is it gives you an opportunity to oxygenate things. You bubble a lot of air through it. So what I've got here is I've got a little air pump from the aquarium store. Pet Works in this case, really nice people. This is my air pump right here. Now I have divided the air line right here so that in this case I've got 2 little air stones that are going to bubble like mad. In our big brewer over there, we have the same sort of thing, but we have a big diaphragm on the bottom that produces lots of bubbles, and then we have a little thing that comes down the top that also produces a lot of bubbles. If you want to get real fancy, you can put a little manifold valve in here so you control how much air goes through each line. But it's important that you have 2 different things that are going to produce lots of bubbles, because one thing that in making your compost tea, we're going to use the compost as the substrate, so to speak, that we get all the bacteria and fungi and microarthropods and protozoans and things out of. But we don't necessarily want to leave the compost in here. For one thing, it would clog up your sprayer real badly. And number 2, after you've broken most of the microbes free, it just doesn't serve any purpose to have the compost sitting there. This is a paint strainer's bag that you'll get at anywhere sells paint. I think this is about 45 cents or something like that. And if you're doing this at home, you simply get a paint strainer's bag. You could probably use old pantyhose or something like that, but that's fine enough. It might keep some of the fungi especially from going through. This is open enough that all the good guys can get through, but it's going to keep the bulk of your compost, the heavier stuff, from actually getting through. So we've got our brewer, whether it's a small bucket or whether it's a big brewer. Now we're going to use our microbe source, which is going to be 1 or more forms of compost. In a 5-gallon bucket, you're probably going to want about 1 to 2 cups of compost maximum. In our 25-gallon brewer, we use about 6 cups of compost. Now, your compost tea is only going to be as good as your compost, because your compost is going to be the source of the microbes that we're putting into the liquid that we are then going to brew. So what's the best kind of compost? Well, I like compost that comes from a number of different sources, has a number of different feedstocks that have, so to speak, that have been put in there to decompose. Naturally, there may be one kind of microbe breaks down cotton burr. Maybe a different kind of microbe that breaks down horse manure. Maybe a different kind of microbe that breaks down alfalfa. Maybe a different kind of microbe that breaks down mushrooms or something like that. If you have a single source compost, like cotton burr compost, you've basically got one substrate in there and you've got one group of microbes that break that down. When you use a better form of compost that has been made from a lot of different things, you're going to get a whole lot greater diversity in microbes. Does that make sense? We use the ladybug compost. John, that makes this revitalizer right here, is what underneath your feet right there. He uses a blend of stuff that's bacterially produced, it's fungally produced, that probably has 30 different feedstocks in making the compost. If you're using compost in a bag, that's the best compost I think you could possibly use. Now, we will frequently add to that. We may bring a little bit of compost out of the bottom of my compost pile at home or Roberta's compost pile at home. We sometimes take other composts like worm compost, the black worm castings, and we put that in our compost tea this week for the first time because we just found a really, really excellent source of worm castings that we're experimenting with. So you can mix up a bunch of different kinds of compost in making your compost tea, and quite frankly, the more different kinds of good compost you have in there, the greater the diversity of life is going to be in your compost tea. Yes, sir?
Makes, when your compost tea is dry, you don't have it now, but does that affect the amount of organisms you get out of it?
Yes, it would. It would be best to get compost that has either not dried out completely, and certainly compost has not been sitting out in the sun.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to go over and look at our pallet area, all our pallets are covered to keep the sun off of them, and for the most part they're stacked up in the shade. I would not expect to get very good life out of a bag of compost that had been sitting on a Walmart parking lot for 2 weeks, because it's been out there pretty much roasting.
I have some old worm casting that's, I guess, that I found is about 2 years old, right? So that isn't very active.
It's good, but it's not great. You know, there's no such, I don't think there's any such thing as bad worm castings.
Okay.
But if you had fresher, better ones. Also, again, and this is slightly off the subject, but I have used some brands of worm castings and seen absolutely no results whatsoever from them. I found a different company making what he calls black worm castings. The guy is an obnoxious SOB. I can't stand it. But he has a good product. And so, anyway, he's not here. Anyway, I tell him to his face, he's just, you know, whatever. But anyway, yeah. But so there is a difference in worm castings to start with. And if you let them dry out, they're not going to be quite as good. But if you want to experiment, and of course, last fall we were just starting to get some moisture. I couldn't grow a garden last year. We weren't allowed to water up in Kendall County. But I found some interesting things. I agreed to take some of his worm castings and use in the small garden that I planted last fall. And I saw some incredible things happen. I planted cauliflower, which of course is not quite as cold hardy as broccoli. And I've got a row of about 30 plants here. I put his worm castings up on the first 8 plants in the row. That 10-degree night came along. Those 8 plants never lost a leaf. Beautiful green. The rest of it, probably 85% of them, froze and died. What it is in there that made them cold hardy, I don't know. I did the same thing on the broccoli. I can't tell the broccoli's any better than any of the others. So there are going to be a lot of experiments going on in my garden this year with the black worm castings. But we do have a few bags of it. If anybody, you know, if you want to buy something and experiment with it, I'll tell you to do so. I can tell you I've seen good results in my garden, but not good enough that we're going to buy 1,000 bags and put it out there and tell you something you really need to do to use.
How much of this black worm casting would you put in your bucket?
Well, we're not going to put it in the bucket. We're going to put it in our thing that holds the compost, and that's what this is for our bucket. And I said we're going to have maybe 1.5 cups material total. I probably would use 1 1/4 cups of just regular compost and maybe 1/4 cup of black worm castings. This is not baking cookies. You don't have to measure things. You know, I do things by the handful or by the feel. This is not an exact science. So a little bit too much, a little bit too little, not really going to have that much effect. But we would really just as soon not have all of that compost wind up in our liquid. So in the case of the big machine out there, it's got a wire-lined basket. We put it in there. In the case of your little bucket, you're going to put your compost down in this bag. And, okay, now let's say this bucket's full of water. And what we're going to do is we want to enhance getting the microbes out of the compost and into the liquid. We do that with air bubbles. Actively flowing air tends to break the bacteria and the fungi loose from the compost and get it out into the liquid. So what we're going to do is to take the smaller, okay, we've got this bigger air stone down here in the bottom of the bucket, and this is keeping our water activated, I mean actively oxygenated. It's bubbling away down there in the bottom of the bucket. We're going to take the smaller stone and we're going to put it down here in the bag of compost and then suspend this down in there, and we're going to leave everything alone for probably about 8 hours. After about 8 hours, we've pretty much gotten all the microbes out of the compost that are going to come out of the compost and into the liquid. So in the case of our big machine, we go over and we just pull the bubbler out, we lift the thing of compost out, set it aside, drop the bubbler back down into the liquid there. In this case, after about 8 hours or so, and that's not exact. It could be 6 hours, it could be 10 hours, it could be 12 hours. It wouldn't really hurt anything if you never took it out, but you'll have a little bit easier to use compost tea. So 8-10 hours later, we're going to take this out. We're just going to drop that down in here into the liquid, and then we're going to go take this compost and put it on our garden or somewhere else. But anyway, so that's how we're going to use the compost. Now the other thing that we're going to do early on, when we first put the compost down in here with the bubbler, we're going to put in the kind of things that make these microbes want to reproduce. And today the real microbiologists are getting so specialized that they're finding very specific things that they can put into the liquid to make one particular kind of microbe reproduce itself over another. This is the kind of thing that Elaine does with her business, is that they will go in and, for instance, there's a very serious fungus disease that kills melons. If you've ever planted or grown melons, if you're a guy growing 500 acres of cantaloupe or whatever, you don't want this particular fungus in there or it will wipe out the root system. You probably lose 2/3 of your crop. They're actually able to make now a specific tea that attacks that one fungus and go out and spray the fields with compost tea. Cost a fraction of using a toxic product and doesn't harm things at all. They're actually making what we would call designer teas that are really made to target one specific problem. We can't do that. We don't have the knowledge or necessarily the fancy brewer. I don't think you really need to do it either. The only thing that you may want to do, there are certain things you can put in that will stimulate fungi over bacteria. There are other things you can put in will stimulate bacteria over fungi. Bacteria tend to loosen your soil, improve your fertilizer utilization, and just be sort of a general stimulant to help plants grow better. Fungi tend to inhibit disease growth and to also help with the breakdown of real woody materials in the soil. So you can do certain things. You can put in stimulants that really enhance fungal growth. You can put in stimulants that really enhance bacterial growth. We tend to just put things in that will sort of create a balance. It will help both things grow a little bit better. Now the first thing that we put in ours, I can't tell you what it is. It's a product we buy. They don't tell us what's in it, but it's simply, they call it compost catalyst, and that's the first thing we put into the water. You may find things like this somewhere, but I don't think they're really necessary. What we tend to do is look at what will make bacteria reproduce without overdoing it. And anything sugary is going to really stimulate bacterial activity. The most sugary, cheap thing that you can put in your compost tea is going to be molasses. But you don't want to overdo it, because molasses, if you put too much in there, the bacteria start reproducing so fast that it will go anaerobic. In a 5-gallon bucket, I'd put maybe a tablespoonful of molasses. In our big brewer, we might put 3 or 4 tablespoons in there, or less.
Just dump it in the water?
Just dump it in the water. The hotter it is, the less you will want to use of your sugary substance, because the hotter it is, faster bacteria are going to reproduce, the greater the potential that we'll have for going anaerobic. So sugary things stimulate bacterial activity, and we're going to use them, but we're going to keep the number fairly low. If we want to...
Bond.
Yes?
Dry molasses or liquid molasses?
Either one. Either one will work fine. If you're using liquid molasses, try not to get a highly sulfured product, because sulfur is a natural fungicide. Sulfur kills fungi, both good and bad. So you don't want an extra sulfured molasses. But dry molasses is fine, or just your regular grocery store molasses, or horticultural molasses will be fine. But if it says extra sulfur, or if it says sulfur molasses, which you will see, that's not what you want to be using for your compost tea. Yes, sir.
In the heat of the summer, does it make any difference whether you do it out in the open or do you need to put it in the shade?
I would put it in the shade because, again, you would like your tea to be at approximate air temperature. And if you put it out in the open, it's going to get hotter than air temperature. If you keep it in the shade, it's probably going to stay right around the ambient temperature.
Is there a way to tell whether you're creating anaerobic activity?
You have a built-in anaerobic aerobic tester. It's called your nose. It smells good and earthy and fresh, it's fine. If it stinks, it's gone anaerobic. It's kind of like your compost pile. Compost pile is smelly. You put plastic on it or something and it didn't get enough oxygen.
Well, if it is just becoming anaerobic, I mean,
no, there's no way you'll be able to tell.
Oh, okay.
It pretty much takes, it would take a very sophisticated dissolved oxygen test, and nobody does that. But it can be damaging. We found one company was making compost tea, And when they got through with it, I mean, it had been bubbling like mad, and they tested the oxygen level once an hour, and it never went anaerobic, and yet it was crappy compost tea. But what they found was that it had gone anaerobic for 10 minutes in the middle of the hour, then gone aerobic again, but that 10 minutes of anaerobic time was enough to kill out so much of the life in there. So when in doubt, I mean, you know, we're not treating 1,000 acres of cropland here. If you're going to do this, err on the side of caution, and you'll end up with a much better tea.
Bob,
Yes.
you know when I had that soil sample by Texas Plant, he told me to put sulfur in my garden, and you were saying it kills bacteria.
Well, it kills fungi.
Oh.
Kills fungi. I don't recommend the use of sulfur. He still does some chemical stuff. Sulfur combines with water to make sulfuric acid, which makes your soil more acidic, which frees up some additional nutrients. But if I'm using sulfur, it's a very, very limited amount. Yes, sir.
And molasses are used for cattle or cow licks, what are
It depends on what's in there. I mean, they
Yeah.
make a lot of different ones.
Got
The
no
one I
sulfur.
use is non-sulfur, so in mine.
got no sulfur in it? More
You have to ask the people that you're getting it from. Because they don't use just straight molasses. They bump it up, put all sorts of other things in there for the cows.
Yeah, what was it? They put protein in it.
Yeah, urea usually, and things like that. Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there a danger of using the compost on something like alfalfa because it's a hot feed?
No. No. Alfalfa greatly benefits from compost tea because alfalfa, of course, is not a grass, it's a legume, and as such, it's much more subject to bad fungal infections. Alfalfa growers hate to see fungus get started in their alfalfa patch. Compost tea almost totally stops the fungal problem. So a lot of alfalfa growers are using compost tea.
Bob,
Yes.
you know, I buy my revitalizer by bulk.
Mhm.
Of course, you know, that's sitting out in his backyard, and when I haul it home, it's sitting in my pile. And you were saying you didn't want to expose your compost to the heat.
Oh, no. And sitting in a pile at home is fine. Sitting in a plastic bag in the middle of the parking lot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
I
little
understand
different.
what you're saying.
Don't take it right off the surface. I mean, you get down 6 inches into it, but that's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. Okay, sugary things stimulate bacteria. If you specifically want to stimulate fungi, various brands will do it. Oat bran and wheat bran are two things that has been found really do stimulate a lot of different fungi in making compost tea. Then there are some other things you can add that really seem to help both bacteria and fungus. Hydrolyzed fish. Now there are two ways they make fish emulsion. One way they make it involves a heat process which kills off a lot of the life that's in your fish emulsion.
What does the bran stimulate? I'm sorry.
The bran stimulates fungus, beneficial fungi. The better forms of fish to use are what we call hydrolyzed or cold pressed fish. And this stuff will really pick up the growth both of bacteria and of fungi, you know, in your compost tea. I highly recommend adding a little bit of hydrolyzed fish when you make your compost tea. Again, to 5 gallons, we'll probably put an ounce or two. To our bigger brewer, we're probably going to put about a cup of this stuff in there. Beyond that, the Thrive product that I was talking to Howard about this morning, this has a lot of different bacteria in it. It also has the mycorrhizal fungi in it. I would not put this in at the very beginning of the brewing process, because if you actually get your mycorrhizal fungi active, they've got to come in contact with the plant pretty quickly. So if you're going to add something like mycorrhizal fungus to it, add this toward the end of the brewing process, because your fungi reproduce more slowly. You're not going to get a huge increase in active fungus. You're going to get an increase in the spore form, or in the case of this, what they call the propagules. But things like this, you probably want to put in the last hour or two before you get ready to use your compost tea. But in general, we're going to put our fish in, we're going to put our bran in, we're going to put a little bit of molasses in, and whatever other black magic we can think of to put in there. And again, it's just a matter of experimenting and seeing what works best.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
you said the bran. The bran is different. What kind of bran?
Oat bran, wheat bran.
And how much?
Get at the grocery store. Probably half a cup.
Okay.
Yes.
What about additives like blood meal and bone meal and things like that. Should you stay away from things like that? Or?
I would almost say experiment with it and see. We tend to feel like we get plenty with the other things rather than putting that in there. But I'm a big experimenter. I don't see anything wrong with giving it a try.
What about seaweed?
Seaweed would be a great thing to add. Yeah, seaweed is another thing along with your hydrolyzed fish. Seaweed is a great thing to add to it. Yes.
Little vinegar?
Of not the distilled vinegar, but apple cider vinegar, yeah, a little bit would be fine. Don't overdo it because acetic acid, which is what vinegar is hard on things. But the natural apple cider vinegar is just fine to add half a cup to, to 5 gallons or something like that.
How about the ground flaxseed instead of bran?
That would be great. That'd be just fine. Yes.
When you have the fish emulsion, do you just drop it into the water?
Just mix it in the water. Yeah, just pour it in the water. Anything you pour in here is going to get mixed up because that bubbling action is really going to keep things stirred around inside there. Yes, sir.
Could you just like use rolled oats instead of oat bran?
It's not quite as effective because there's not quite as much surface area, but it's still good. Oat bran is chopped up finely enough, you simply have more surface area for the fungi that are in there to colonize on and start to reproduce. So it's good, but the bran is probably 10 times better because it probably has 10 times more surface area. Yes, sir.
You said sugars for bacteria and oat brands and whatnot for the fungi. Can you grow together?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But again, if you're out there trying to soften the soil is the main purpose of making your tea, you're interested mainly in bacterial activity. If you're out there spraying to try to control a fungus problem, you're interested more in beneficial fungi. So you can make something slightly different every time you make it.
Does it help control the black spot on roses?
Oh, it will. Absolutely. It certainly will.
Spraying it?
Yeah. And that, you got a little cornmeal in there if you want to. Cornmeal grows a fungus called trichoderma. Trichoderma is what controls your black spot. But yes, it will very definitely help with black spot. Yes?
That bubbler that you bought, does it come like that, or did you have to put it together yourself?
I got it in 4 different packages. I got this in one package. I got a chunk of the tubing in one package. I got the air stones in another package. This little splitter came with the air deal.
Those stones, they come in different sizes?
They come in different sizes. This one's probably big enough for this bucket, and this one's probably big enough for the bag. But if you want to put 2 or 3 or 4 stones in there, it would be just fine.
You get that at
I got it at Pet Works right down here in Lincoln Heights. Yes.
And you put the one bubbler in the bag and the other bubbler in the bucket
Exactly.
in the initial phase.
Right.
Yeah.
Then when you take your compost out, might as well dump that other stone down in there and get as much air as possible. Yes.
I'm sorry, one more question. On the oat bran and wheat bran, are you just sticking that in the bucket or you put it in the bag?
If it's a real brandy material, it's actually probably you're going to put it in the water. But if you're using that and you're going to put this through a sprayer, then you may have to strain it before you put it in your sprayer. If you're just pouring it on, the great majority of compost tea that goes onto my garden gets poured on rather than sprayed on. And the reason is that on Sunday afternoon, if we have anything left over here, it goes home with me and goes into my garden. But I'm not going to take time to strain it before I spray it. But if you're using the brands and they're coarse enough they might clog up your sprayer, then you'll probably have to strain it. But you don't want to put it in with your compost because you're taking that out halfway or a third of the way into the brewing process. You'd rather that brand stay down in your soup, so to speak, that you're making.
So just put it in the water.
Just put it in the
And
water.
that Thrive? Because when you said Thrive Vitamin, you thought of the Super Thrive.
Yeah, no, Super Thrive we're going to leave
Because
out.
I used that Super Thrive when you told me before to use it. That stuff worked good.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put that in compost tea. Thrive is a totally different process.
And
product.
that, how much do you put in there?
Probably 2 or 3 tablespoons in here, probably half a bottle in the other one.
Okay.
Again, it's not rocket science. Yes.
Well, we gotta start
It seemed like you and I discussed on a 5-gallon bucket, since I got such a large garden, we could take that compost tea and break it like in 4 parts.
Yeah, 5 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, that's fine. That's just fine. Okay, now we've got it started brewing. Yes, ma'am.
What did you say if you're going to buy the compost to put in the bag? What did you say was the best time to buy?
Revitalizer Compost by Ladybug.
Okay.
It, I think is the best compost for purchase on the market.
All right.
What about New Earth compost?
New Earth compost is good. Ladybug actually buys a lot of their compost from New Earth. So it's sort of the same thing. New Earth's the best compost you're going to buy in bulk. But, you know, it's, you don't need to buy a truckload of compost to get 2 cups of material.
About like 6 yards, and I had some left over,
Sure.
about half a yard.
Yeah.
Just put it in a pile, just take some of that.
That's fine, just fine. Yes?
Is the compost tea enough to fight the early blight, or do I need to put some cornmeal in it to help with it? Because I get it every
I'd probably put some cornmeal in it to help. I just, in my garden, early blight is not that much of a problem, so I can't claim that I'm a real expert on controlling it. It does seem to be more of a problem in some gardens, but I know the compost tea will definitely help.
Well, the plant wash works, but this seems like a better idea.
Okay.
Probably varieties of tomatoes too, I think.
That very definitely has something to do with it. Some tomatoes, Romas, and some of the others are very definitely more susceptible. Yellow pear is much more susceptible to early blight than red pear in my experience. This is why you keep records. You know, if you were here last week for the vegetable garden seminar, that old rural mailbox I told you to take and put out in your vegetable garden, you write down what you're doing and what you're planting, because then you'll know what went right and what went wrong. Do you know the question?
Yeah, previous seminars you were talking about the different composters around here, and I get mine from Fertile Gardens because it's close to me.
They don't want you to know if the Fertile Garden buys a lot of compost from New Earth.
But now they're selling two types. One is a cow manure or cow compost, and the other is a horse/turkey compost. Should I get both of them? I mean, the one's more expensive than the other, or can I just go with the cheaper of the two?
You're only going to need a cup or 2 of it.
Well, I'm using it for my gardens as well, but I'm...
On your garden, I'm going to tell you to experiment. See what works best. The turkey compost is going to have more fertilizer per se, and it's going to have more nitrogen in it than the cow, because it takes material a lot longer to go through the cow, so to speak. Cow has a much more complex digestive system. It's why a horse has to eat 3 times as much as a cow does, because the stuff goes through the horse's intestine a whole lot faster. It's why you get weed seed in horse manure, but not in cow manure. Cows are much more efficient machines at processing what they eat, so there is much less nutrient left in the cow manure when it comes out the back end of the cow. Turkeys and chickens process things very quickly and not super efficiently, so their manures tend to have a lot more nitrogen and, quote, fertilizer quality to it. Does that make sense?
If I'm adding fertilizer, then it's no big deal.
Then it's no big deal in the garden.
Gotcha.
Don't add fertilizer if you're making compost tea.
No.
But again, if you want to go out to Fertile Garden Supply, tell them what you're doing. They'll let you go out with a little bag and pick up whatever you want, not even charge you for it. They're good guys. At least tell them I said they would.
Because of the picloram issue, is that also something to avoid with the compost tea?
Picloram is deadly, and nothing known to man breaks down picloram. So you very strictly, picloram is not necessarily going to hurt the microbes in your tea, but picloram is going to hurt the plants that you put the tea on. So, yeah, you need to be very sure that your compost is picloram free. And of course, you've heard me. Picloram, of course, is the herbicide that some people spray on their hay fields, goes right through the cow or the horse, comes out in the manure. Picloram kills everything except grass. Oak trees, clover, weeds, everything except grass, picloram kills. And it is not broken down in the animal that eats it. So it comes out in the manure, and everywhere you put that manure, then it's going to start killing. I mean, that's why you see big dead oak trees out in the middle of the field. The rancher sprayed that hay crop with picloram. The cows have eaten the hay. They go over and lie down in the shade to take a little nap. They get up, they pee, they poop underneath the tree, and pretty soon the tree's dead. Picloram is just bad news. If you're getting manure from somewhere for your garden and you don't know whether it may be picloram contaminated or not, you take some of that manure, take an extra bucket. Take that bucket, fill it 2/3 full with manure, fill that with water, let it soak for a day or two, and then take that water out and go find a broadleaf weed, clover, dandelion, something like that. Pour that exudate off of the manure on it and watch it for a couple days. If the weed shrivels up and dies, yeah, there's picloram in the manure. If the weed continues to grow and thrive, not enough picloram to worry about.
All my hay that I had,
yeah,
it was all, he had a picloram on it, because I put it on that wide leaf. There was a big tall one, and it all died. So all my compost pile that I have, the hay, it's all
bad. Yep. Yes, sir.
Was there any advantage to yeast in a microbial aspect of
Yeast, of course, is a fungus. It's an ascomycete, but I don't know that it is beneficial, really, in compost tea. Yeast, of course, in its metabolism makes alcohol.
Right, that's why.
And alcohol kills most other things.
That's why I would say.
So I probably, yeast isn't really going to hurt. And I mean, if you happen to get some of the brewery waste or something like that, that's probably okay. But I wouldn't use that for making compost tea.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On that pickler end, can you make an attempt? I'm not having any luck spelling it, and I really need to find out about it. I'm raising worms, and I have some horse manure being offered to me, and I don't want to get any.
You do not want picloram in there. There's nothing known to man that breaks down picloram. So you've either got to find out where the hay came from that was being fed to these horses, or you've got to test it. And that simple soak test, pour on the dandelion, is as effective as a several $100 lab test.
Has anyone done any kind of life cycle or persistency studies on picloram?
The chemical companies that make it are suppressing that kind of work. They don't want the word out, because if people knew how bad it was, eventually you get taken off the market. I don't know of anyone who's done the studies. Malcolm Beck feels like that in a commercial compost pile, when you get temperatures up 180, 185, that it breaks down the picloram to some extent. I don't know that I agree with that. I think it's just diluting it down to the point that you don't see the effects as much. But in a home compost pile, you're never going to get rid of it.
How do you spell it?
Picloram, Picloram. And it's sold under names like Grazon and P+D and things like that. Okay, back to making compost tea. We've taken the compost bag out of that, and we've got it sitting here bubbling and bubbling and bubbling. When is the ideal time to use it? Anytime after about 18 hours, you're going to have a lot of microbes in there, and it would be a good time to use it. After 24 hours to probably 36 hours, that is probably the optimum time. That is when you're going to have the highest concentration of microbes in there. After about 36 hours to 48 hours, they have started to use up the materials that you put in there, to help them grow and reproduce and all. And the good qualities of it start to decrease. Certainly after 48 hours, they have decreased substantially.
Is that 16 to 24 hours after you take the bag out? Or is that total time?
That's total time.
Total time, so it'd be like 16 hours then after the bag comes
Yeah.
out.
We make our compost tea 8 o'clock on Friday mornings. We start selling it at 10 o'clock on Saturdays, and it's very good. When I look at it, when I get in here at 6 a.m. on Sunday mornings, it's probably going to have the optimum levels of it in there. But we kind of figured we make it early Saturday, or early Friday. It's great all day Saturday and Sunday. At the end of the day, Sunday, we take what's left, and either I take it home or we pour it on the plants around here. But people who use it and use it with some regularity really do see somewhat amazing results with it. Now, how often should you use it? If you use it 2 or 3 times a year, it's going to help. If you've got badly compacted soil or if you've got serious disease conditions, you could use it once a week. I know Wendy had some issues with the new house and a new garden. She used it about once a week for about 8 or 10 weeks and said it was just miraculous what it did. Other people put it on once or twice a year and feel like they see real good results. So there's really no such thing as too much or too little. Anything you do is going to be beneficial. Now, if you're using this bucket, or if we're using that compost tea maker to make compost tea, we want to clean it thoroughly after we take the tea out of it. We can get what are known as biofilms built up on the inside, and biofilms can contain some not so good things, some things that we really don't want to be reproducing. So clean your bucket thoroughly, get a little hydrogen peroxide or something, drop your air stones down in there to clean them thoroughly. And once that bucket, after you've used it 15, 20 times, probably just as good to go on and get another bucket. But scrub them as best you can, and if you want to use a disinfectant to clean them out, probably hydrogen peroxide is about the best disinfectant you can use, because it goes away completely. It breaks down to nothing but to water and oxygen. H2O2 becomes H2O. Pretty simple chemistry there.
What would you mix the hydrogen peroxide?
I use it straight.
Great.
Use it straight out of the bottle. What you're getting at the drugstore or the grocery store is pretty dilute anyway. You can put that directly on your skin. Now, on your skin, you can buy concentrated hydrogen peroxide, but it is nasty stuff. They use it to shock wells and things like that to get bacteria out of that, and that's much more concentrated. But all you need is the stuff you get for 50 cents a bottle at HEB. Yes.
My neighbor's easily confused, and last time
She's good.
Last time I told her, don't stir your compost tea because it disturbs the growth of the fungus. But now I'm just telling her.
Don't stir your compost pile because it disturbs the growth of the fungi. The fungi that are in here have not propagated and gone everywhere. They are in a very small form. And again, that's the reason that we don't want this to look like the North Atlantic in winter. We don't want that water, doing this. That would be enough to damage the fungi. But just kind of a rolling boil, that's not enough to bother them. So, great question. Don't stir the compost pile, but the oxygen is stirring your compost tea. Yes?
In my rain barrel, I noticed like an orange film building up on the edge of the water. Is that what you referred to as
That's not really a biofilm. That is probably a red algae of some sort growing. Now, if you started dumping molasses or something in your rain barrel that was stimulating the bacteria in the water, then you could get a biofilm built up. But you're not going to have biofilms on just undiluted rainwater or things like that. You're going to get some interesting algae. And if you put that algae under a microscope, you can get some interesting little creatures living in that algae. But none of them are bad guys.
Thank you.
Yes?
Okay, now, we let this go for 8 hours with the stone aerators in there. But now, when did you say we take out the
Take
bag?
the compost out after about 8 hours. Take
Okay,
the bag
the
out after
compost
about 8 hours. But we leave the aerators in there the whole time.
Oh,
Don't
okay.
ever take the oxygen away. You want the oxygen going the whole time, but you're going to pull this bag of compost out
After
about 8 hours. Don't throw it away. I mean, don't make more compost tea with it, but go dump it on your garden somewhere. It's still good
Okay,
stuff.
so then we leave the aerators in there for the
18 hours.
The 18
Up to
hours.
48 hours. Up until you use the compost tea. Leave the aerators in there.
Okay, great.
That's additional 18 hours?
Or total. It's just, again, we're not exact. Again, if you make it one morning, use it the next day. If you make it one afternoon, use it the second day. Yes?
Can you explain why the foaming would be bad?
You'd make a mess.
Okay.
Yeah. There's nothing bad about it except that it literally, it might look like Mount Vesuvius with foam coming out of the top of it. There's nothing bad with it. It's just messy.
Children would
That's the
love
only
it.
thing. Yeah, kids would love it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, these compost tea, does that help with your early blight on tomatoes?
It almost certainly does.
It does, you don't have to use the hand wash that, huh?
Try them both. Again, what works in your garden might not work in mine. What works in my garden might not work in yours. Gardening, if you haven't learned it by now, is not an exact science. And what works for her might not work for you, might not work for me. And that's why it's important that you keep notes. And that's also important why you don't listen too carefully to the experts that tell you how to do something. I know in my college days, working in an electron microscopy lab, the scanning electron microscopes especially were brand new. And I would go into the director of our lab and I'd say, Vanita, I did such and such, is that right? And she would say, well, did it work? And I said, yes. And she said, well, then that's right. That's not how I would have done it, but the way you did it worked, and therefore, that's the right way to do it. The three of us came up with a rotary coating technique that's still the standard of the electron microscopy world, now 40 years later. We did it by experimenting. But if something works in your garden, don't let anybody tell you that that's the wrong thing to do. But if you're not being successful with something, by the same token, don't let anybody tell you that you're doing it right. Obviously, in your environment, your growing condition, it's not working. So look for something different to do, because everybody's garden is a different microclimate and everybody's successes are going to be different. Just keep up with what you do, so when you have a really successful crop, you'll know how to go back and repeat it and get the same results again. Yes?
Back to cleaning the bucket, do you use straight peroxide or do you dilute it with some water?
What I do is scrub the bucket and then rinse with straight peroxide.
And how about putting it through the bubblers?
The bubblers, I'm just going to drop them down into a little cup of hydrogen peroxide.
straight peroxide.
Straight peroxide. Yes, sir.
So if you took your painter's bag and emptied it out and put it in the peroxide, that would sanitize the bag?
That would, but again, I'm really not as concerned about biofilms on the painter's bag because it's only been in there 8 hours and then it's dried out completely. I'm not worried about biofilms the second time you make compost tea in this bucket. After you've been making it in the same bucket for 6 or 8 or 10 times, then it gets a whole lot more important to clean it. Yes, ma'am.
As far as rain barrels, if you leave the water in there, don't use it for a while, does it get stale or?
It can get stale, so to speak. It can get mosquito larvae in it. It can lose some of the magic of rainwater because some of it's going to, disappear out of the water. The nitrogen that's in there is probably going to turn back to gas and go away. But is it bad? No, it doesn't ever go bad. But it's that's impossible to say. My friend John Kite up in Bernie, and we may get him to come down and do a rainwater harvest deal sometime. John's got 30,000 gallons of rainwater storage. He doesn't have a well. He's lived on rainwater alone for, 12, 14 years, something. He has the cleanest, clearest water, the clearest ice you've ever seen. He just has a UV filter he uses on his rainwater. By the way, if anybody's interested in rainwater collection, he does workshops about once a month at the Civil Nature Center up there. If you're really interested in rainwater harvest, I believe it's next weekend up in Kerrville. There is it's an all-day program Friday with lectures that you'll pay to go to, all-day display on Saturday. Go to TXRHS, I think it's the Texas Rainwater Harvest Society or organization, something like that. And you'll see all about the rainwater harvest seminar next weekend. Jason?
I also have them on the video from the Roundup last year.
Okay. Up at the Renewable Energy Roundup in Fredericksburg, he gave a program. You have that on video, and people will find it on YouTube at?
YouTube.com/Organic Texas. One word, Texas is spelled out.
Okay. Find all sorts of good things there. You can see John's presentation. The good thing about going and actually taking one of his courses at the Civil Nature Center is they're not held at the Civil Nature Center. You meet there, and then he takes you to his home and shows you, exactly what the system looks like and how it works. That's $25 you'll spend if you're interested in rainwater harvest. Okay, that's most of what I have to tell you about compost tea. From here on, we'll be question-driven. And feel free as you go out to, lift the lid and look down in the big bubbler over there. I will tell you, we make compost tea every weekend. I have, in effect, empowered you to make your own compost tea if you want. If you don't, we make it by the gallon and sell it Saturdays and Sundays here. I think it's $5.75 or something. Doesn't cost that much to make, but that machine was almost $2,000, and the catalyst and things we put in there, we're going to recoup that cost, a gallon at a time. But, and like I said, we have it pretty much all day, every Saturday and Sunday, until we run out. Certain times of the year, we run out of by the middle of the day Saturday. Most of the time, we have a little bit at least left on Sunday morning. Yes, sir.
I'm in Black Clay, east of the interstate in San Marcos. I've been doing my own compost tea for a couple of years, and it's still refractory to just about anything. That stuff is nasty. Now, should I emphasize the bacteria or the fungi?
What I would do is put a bunch of bacterial stimulants in your soil, molasses, dry molasses or regular molasses. We're not worried about it going anaerobic in the soil. So I would work on putting things in the soil that are going to stimulate the microbes. I would add the microbes in the form of your compost tea, but I would be putting like dry molasses or liquid in the soil and some compost if you can to speed up the softening of the soil, so to speak.
And then kill it at that point?
You don't need to. The microbes actually change the soil structure into what we call a crumb structure that opens it up and loosens it. You don't really gain anything by tilling.
Okay.
In fact, it's counterproductive in some ways because it brings organic material up to the surface, then oxidizes and goes away. I will stay here and answer questions, but if anybody has got to go, you're not going to offend me by getting up and going. Next week's seminar is on roses. Yes, ma'am.